The Institutionalization of Censorship Boards During the Apartheid and Its Effects in South Africa Today by Joey Gallagher. My research for this project consists of the creation of the Press Commission and counter-protest censorship through the use of alternative reading circuits. I plan on examining the pre-apartheid atmosphere that led to the Press Commission and how this has led to the creation of the SABC and the controversies surrounding censorship today in South Africa. South Africa contains up to 53 million people and shares northern borders with Mozambique, Swaziland, Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. Starting in the 1600s, Dutch settlers and in the 1800s, British settlers made their mark in slicing up territories for themselves in South Africa. During this time, the local African people were divided and displaced because of the white settlers who sought to colonize and label them. The discovery of minerals and gold led to the British and Dutch investment in South Africa to extract these resources. At the time, many white businessmen used African migrant workers to take advantage of the resources for their own personal gain. This created an uneven power flow as white capitalists began to take advantage of politics, which would later lead to the apartheid. During the time of pre-apartheid, many white writers expressed their dominance over colored citizens through their writings. One author, Jeffrey Cronje, expressed his disdain for blood mixing in his book, A Home for Posterity. Cronje and other writers expressed many dominant white views in their writings, including the idea that the white man was a guardian for the colored people. The apartheid was a movement in the mid-1900s which resulted in the separation of citizens in South Africa based on their race. It was fueled by a white-dominating attitude which resulted in the separation of races. This resulted in counter-protest movements against these laws. The Censorship Commission was created based on Cronje and others' views to restrict and limit information that may have been insulting to the new apartheid rule. Eventually, Jeffrey Cronje would lead the Publications Committee as a member of the Broder Band and create stricter censorship laws against local publications. There has been a history of censorship before the apartheid. Peter MacDonald notes that in Literature Police that before the Afrikaners' rise to power in 1948, there was the Entertainments Act of 1931 enacted by the Union of South Africa. Starting in 1934, this act was amended to also pertain to books and periodicals. The 1931 Act covered a range of topics to be censored, including passionate love scenes, public drunkenness, and any insult to the British monarch at the time. The Press Commission was created from the first Board of Censors. This Board of Censors was enacted in the 1940s and 50s to control locally produced publications. This board evolved when the newly elected nationalist government decided for the board to evaluate a list of undesirable publications under the commission inquiry. The Cronje Commission was asked to investigate over 400 pieces of literature. The board would be used as a template for the Press Commission and how to handle censorship through the institutionalization of local literature within the apartheid. The commission was established behind two main themes. The first theme being the preservation of keeping Western literature pure and upholding white political correctness. The other idea was that white culture would become degenerated through the contamination of colored cultures. To the Press Commission, the scope of its focus became literature, as reports of locally written literature had more of an effect on colored populations rather than magazines created for a white readership. In October of 1957, the Press Commission published an article called Stop the Spread of Offensive Reading Matter. The report highlighted the Commission's survey of books published in the Union between the years of 1935 to 1954. The report claimed that while profane books had an upswing of publications, the books of literary merit had declined. At this point, the Press Commission adopted stricter guidelines to publications and educational programs to institutionalize the quality of publications to persuade the public to change their literary tastes. In the political sense, the Freedom Charter was enacted in 1955 to strengthen the citizens' voice in their government. However, this act was denounced as white nationalist party used their power in office to create a counteract by putting people in office to govern the people who had already been corrupted by the nationalist party values. On a socio-cultural level, books and banned literature became a shared activity in households and among other communities. It became common for most reading audiences to read the same banned book at night, hidden from the public eye. In one household, around 4 to 5 people would read the same book at once, hiding the book behind bookshelves or under floorboards. The chanting of banned poetry or songs tended to happen at funerals and gatherings. There was a large connection between the banned poetry literature and the Black consciousness movement. One community hall in Port Elizabeth served as a meeting place for many to discuss banned books and contemporary political issues affecting censorship and publication. At some of these places, authors and teachers would come by to discuss foreign texts in relation with South African political issues. Once again, these meetings would be directly connected to the Black consciousness movements, as Mamphela Ramphele commented that these movements would happen on our campus and help students widen their knowledge of oppressed communities in South Africa. Towards the end of apartheid, there are many areas in South Africa that had cultural protests of censorship through social gatherings. By this time, the Censorship Committee had increased its censorship through the Dekker and Kruger eras of repression. During this time, 10 out of 14 Afrikaans titles were banned, as many as other foreign literature pieces. In central Johannesburg, many areas were known at this time as hubs to discuss banned poetry and politics. Every time the Censorship Commission strengthened their strictness, locals would push back with the support of banned works and discussions over political struggles. Eventually, this push-pull process would happen until the eventual end of the apartheid, leading to a new era in South Africa that would be censorship-free. The SABC is known as the South African Broadcasting Corporation. This station provides 19 radio stations as well as 4 television channels for public viewing. In Afrikaans, the corporation is known as the SAUK. The channel was established to provide leverage and knowledge to the public and away from the broader band and the National Party. Starting in 1990, the SABC became available to all viewers across Southern African borders for the first time. One major player in the possible censorship in South Africa right now is the controversy behind the Protection of the State of Information Bill. The bill, if enacted, would give the government more power in withholding information from the public and subject whistleblowers and journalists to larger jail time if found guilty of leaking possible government secrets. The bill was almost passed in 2010 by Congress, but was stopped by Jacob Zuma in 2013. Recently, the COO of the SABC, Wally Mososeng, has declared that the SABC will no longer show violent student protests on their channels. This has worried many South Africans, for the SABC is a giant in terms of producing and publishing articles on news in many different parts of South Africa. With the start of the censorship in this area, it is impossible to say what other events may be censored as well. In conclusion, we can see how the main voices behind the apartheid created the Press Commission and further instilled censorship practices into the circulation of literature and poetry. Many anti-censorship movements, including the Freedom Charter and the Black Consciousness Movement, moved against the Press Commission to create attention, and this helped with the disbursement of the apartheid in the 1990s. Now, we can see the influences of the apartheid still affecting censorship today in the media. With the open censorship of the SABC and the refusal to show protests, there is a possibility that South Africa may continue the trend of censorship in their media. We can take strides in destroying censorship through the education of the apartheid censorship and how these events change the sphere of South Africa today.